Welcome everybody to Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. That's right. Welcome back to Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. I am Dr. B, and this is show number 13. That's right. Show number 13, Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus, and it's entitled Fun Class Exercise on Race. That's right. Fun Class Exercise on Race. Wow. Yes, this is show number 13. We're still doing it here on Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. I am Dr. B, and I just want to thank all of our followers for these very engaging shows. Because our past show number 12, was a live stream, and it was entitled The Positive Outcomes of Good Race and Ethnic Relations. We previously, and before then, we tested the live show, and then we had show number 11 was Positive Outcomes of Good Race and Ethnic Relations, and then, again, show number 10 hit some very serious topics. But right now, we are moving on to show number 13, and it's entitled Fun Class Exercise on Race. Yes, it's about time. I want to make sure that we get the most out of these shows. So let me just do a little work for our sponsors. Thank you. We want to thank Podbean. Really thank Podbean for giving us an opportunity to showcase a lot of the issues, very serious issues that we want to talk about, but as well as fun issues when we talk about race and ethnic relations on campus. So we want to thank Podbean for showcasing us, for providing us the live stream. We had a great time. We're going to do more live shows. So thank you, Podbean. Thank you, Spotify. Thank you, iTunes. iTunes, thank you so much. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, as well as YouTube. So again, and as well as iHeartRadio. iHeartRadio picked us up, and we really appreciate the listeners on iHeartRadio. So I am Dr. B, and one of the things that really catches my attention is trying to bring my students together to have fun in class. Yes, I'm a professor at a university, East Carolina University, and I always try new things out to bring my students together. That's particularly challenging in 2019. Because, as I said in previous shows, students tend to stay separated from one another just by who they are, how they're raised, and the technology. Everyone has their iPhone, everyone has this and that, and it's very comforting. And what I try to do in my classes, since I've been teaching for over 30-some years, but particularly now here at ECU, and within the past few years, I truly try to do all different types of strategies to bring my students together, to get them out of their comfort zone and start to engage with a student who may look different than them. And one of the most recent strategies that I have used is, and this is not in a race and ethnic relations class, this is actually in a cultural anthropology class that I teach, cultural anthropology and ethnic studies, but this is primarily a cultural anthropology class. Now, what is so fascinating about this is that I try to, when we start lecturing about ethnicity and race, all my students get fairly nervous. It gets really quiet in the lecture room. And now this is not a race and like I said, not a race and ethnic relations class. This is a regular cultural anthropology class. But when we talk about so many different things, we have topical, traditional anthropological topics. But when we get to ethnicity and race and ethnicity, my students automatically kind of clam up. They get nervous. And they start trying not to make eye contact with me. And I said, and I try all different types of ways to make our discussion, our lecture topics as easy as possible, as approachable as possible. And this is so critical, particularly for college students in a mainstream college, to interact with one another in a lecture room, but also interact with one another outside the lecture room and on the day-to-day basis on your college campus, whatever college campus it is. It's so important to engage, to learn, and here it is, to learn about each and every cultural and racial ethnic population, particularly here in the United States. It's an easy way. It's not. Again, you don't have to take a specific class on a specific racial and ethnic population. You can start learning from each and every one student by individuals sharing what they know about each and every racial and ethnic population in the United States. So here we go. In this class, in this exercise, this fun class exercise on race, what I do is I come in, and they don't know about this. They don't know what I'm going to do. I come into the lecture hall, and nice size class, and I just say, I'm going to break you guys up into 6 groups. And they're looking around. So what? I say, I'm going to break you up in 6 groups. And I go in the lecture hall and divide the class up into 6 groups. Usually it's like 4 rows of students each, and it's nice lecture class. So whoever's in these first 4 rows, they're in group number 1. The next 4 rows, they're in group number 2. The next 4 rows, they're in group number 3. And then I go to the other side of the class of the lecture hall. The next 4 rows are in group number, like I said, 4, and then group number 5, and then group number 6. So they stay in their seats, but then they're in the groups. So I said, in these groups, I'm going to, and I don't identify them with a particular population at that point in time. I said, and then I go to the board, and I write on the board, identify specific cultural traits and patterns associated with each racial ethnic population. That's right. I said, I write on the board, identify specific cultural patterns, traits, customs associated with each racial and ethnic population. So then I go to identify group number 1. Group number 1 are identify them based upon our racial classification in the United States. Strictly, I go by this. Group number 1, you take on the group American Indian Alaska Native. Group number 2, you're Asian American Pacific Islanders. Group number 3, you're African American Blacks. Group number 4, you're Hispanic and Latinos. Group number 5, you're Caucasian and whites. And group number 6, you're multiracial Americans. Wow. Once I identify them, the students start to move in their seats. I said, yeah, that's right. Then I look at the groups. I said, group number 1, you're American Indian Alaska Native. Group number 2, you're Asian American Pacific Islanders. Group 3, you're African American Blacks. Group 4, you're Hispanic and Latinos. And group 5, you're Caucasian and whites. And group 6, you're multiracial Americans. Again, they're starting to rumble in their seats. And I said, well, stop right there. I tell my students, do not take out your phone. Do not close your laptops. You do not Google anything. You do not look up information anywhere. You start to talk with your fellow classmate in your group and write out a list. Come up with a list of 5 to 10 or whatever number of cultural traits, customs that you can think of within your group that's associated with your group. And that's when they start fumbling. They start, oh my gosh, they start talking. Oh my gosh. And I said, go right ahead. You have 20 minutes to come up with a list. So they all get out of the seats, they get closer, and they have a huddle and so forth. They talk amongst each other. And you can just see the students really relax. And then Some get some do get very nervous. They're like, oh my gosh, they get nervous. Other groups, they're having a good time. They immediately say, oh, I don't know what are the cultural traits or attributes of this group versus that group, this group. And you can just see and you can feel it's just so exciting. They're relaxed. They're relaxing. And you hear the laughter. You hear some groups they start asking questions. What about this? Or what? I said, no. Just identify the major attributes, customs that you know of that are somewhat associated with each and every group. So again, I give them 5 to 10 minutes, and then I said identify someone to come to the board, and of course they had to pick their individual student. They come to the board. And this is very recent, and I do this every year in my cultural anthropology class, every year. And it's a great learning process for me, but also primarily for students. So what happens, I'm going to give you the list and my students did an outstanding job, by the way. And they did their best, and every year they do an outstanding job. Yet I'm gonna read the cultural traits, and now just please preface this. Take this for face value, but this is where the learning begins. So here's what group number 1, and they're all different. Group number 1 consists of all different types of students here, and there's Caucasian white students, African American students, Hispanic Latinos. There's American Indian Alaska Native students, but this group, and I'm not going to tell you all the dynamics of each group, but again, just the regular mainstream college crowd. So group number 1, here's what they identify American Indian Alaska Natives, and I have it right here. They are, number 1, specific. There's also spirits for specific things. They used to be nomadic. They work as tribes with leaders, tribal leaders. They prefer songs, dance, and rituals. And their history is passed down orally. That's it. Again, group number 1 identified these traits with American Indian Alaska Natives. Spirits for specific things. Used to be nomadic. Work as tribe with tribal leaders. They prefer songs, dance, rituals, and history passed down orally. For group number 2, the leader wrote this. Now, I'll tell you a little backdrop, a little bit. I'll tell you right now. The group leader for group number 2, and this population was Asian American Pacific Islander. It just so happened that the student is Filipino. So here's what he wrote on the board for our class and representing group number 2. Naturally dark skin, hair, and eyes. Big families, typically short, eat a lot of rice, loud at gatherings, value education, like singing, and typically skinny. Wow. I'm going to get back to group number 2, Asian American Pacific Islanders, in just a moment. Group number 3. This was a Caucasian gentleman representing group number 3, African American blacks. And again, he wrote on the board, church going, celebrate American holidays, keep up with cultural trends, hair always looks good, love music and athletic. That's group number 3. Group number 4, Hispanic Latinos. Now the person who represented this group, she just happened to be Hispanic, a Latino. And so she wrote on the board, customs and beliefs, Catholic, believe in Catholicism. Food usually consists of beans or rice. Hispanics are energetic and loud. Holidays, Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Cinco de Mayo. Communities are usually accepting of other Hispanics, and big families and gatherings. Group number 5. They said for Caucasian whites, and it just happened to be a Caucasian white female, wrote on the board, celebrate holidays such as Halloween, Thanksgiving, etc. Diverse backgrounds such as Scottish, Irish, Polish heritage. Tend to be Christianity, go to church going. Also, white privilege. White privilege. I'll come back to that. And she also wrote basic white girl fraternity, frat, sorority. Stereotype. Fast food and blonde hair, blue eyes. I'm going to come back to that. Very interesting. And group number 6, multiracial Americans. And this was an African-American gentleman. And he wrote on the board, broad food options, different languages, more open-minded, blended traditions, and family. Wow. So when they wrote and what happens also, they have to write it, and then what I tell them is you have to explain it. You have to explain it. And that's when the crowd, the rest of the students in the lecture hall, they start chuckling and laughing, because when the group leader has to explain it and they're not of the group, that's when the fun really begins. And the first group, number 1, American and Alaska Native, he wasn't American and Alaska Native. He was explaining it, and he was a bit nervous, but that was the fun part. And he explained the best way he could, talking about spirits, talking about used to be nomadic, work as tribes, and so again, sharing what they knew of the cultural traditions in a respectful way, but also, touching upon, trying not to be as stereotypical, but that's going to happen when you're not a part of the group. And I at that point in time, I just say, go right ahead. I encourage them, and I say, and I encourage others to say, just listen, let him get it out. And he did a great job explaining American and Alaska Natives, just a few that they knew. And then with group number 2, Asian American Pacific Islanders, this gentleman was right on point. And he was and I was so proud that he represented. He didn't have to, but he came to the board. And I asked him questions. And he first started off with the physical features. Now, many times, students don't talk about the physical features associated with their various racial and ethnic populations. He did. He said naturally dark skin, hair, and eyes. And I asked him why. He said, that's the way we are. And the other students in the class said, wow. And I commended him. I said, thank you for stating the obvious. And that's what doesn't usually happen when we talk about race and ethnicity, and have fun with it. And we laughed. The class laughed. He laughed. And then he talked about big families, typically short. And I said, is always typically? He said, yes. And I even said, I'm a little guy. I'm a short person. So that's good to know that, at least you say Asian American Pacific Islanders are typically short. And then he says, eat a lot of rice, loud and gathered. And I said, what do you mean by loud? He said, when we all get together, we just are very loud. We don't buffer anything. We're just loud. And he also said, yes, in some respect, the next attribute, we value education, but he also said that's very stereotypical. Not every Asian American Pacific Islanders is that places education's high priority, the pressure, but we do value education. He says we like singing and typically skinny. I said, oh, excellent. Now, those are just some great cultural attributes as well as physical attributes. So that was really insightful and really giving of him to share that very frank and to the point. Truly appreciate that. And then representative group number 3. Now this was funny because again, I'm an African American and the group leader was Caucasian, white student, and he did an outstanding, representation. Even though his group was laughing in the back and we were all kind of chuckling, he handled it well. And I said, keep going, because he said African Americans tend to be church going, celebrate American holidays, keep up with cultural traditions, cultural trends. And I kept on asking, why is this? He said, And he said it in such glowing way, in such positive way, not in very stereotypical way, but the way he learned from friends and what he has observed. And that's the greatest, what he observed by observing African Americans. And he even pointed out to one of my students in class who fit some of the profiles, such as keeping up with cultural trends. It was right on point. He also mentioned hair always looks good, and one of my African American students commended him for recognizing that, because that is a pattern. Also love music and athletic. So we all kind of had a great time, laughed. The class actually laughed. Then we were joking. Of course, I brought in my particular issues as an African American and male, and just played along with it. And he just took it all. And the class just truly enjoyed. It kind of revved up another level, and we were joking around. But he did it with such respect and wanted to represent, and he did. Outstanding. And then there was group number 4. Wow, she did a great job of explaining. And I said, please explain, because I don't know. And I said, the rest of the class doesn't know. And she provided specificity, because she was Hispanic Latino, and I think she mentioned she was Puerto Rican. And so she mentioned it in a more specific detail. Particularly the customs and beliefs. Catholic food usually consists of beans and I didn't get the other one, or rice. Are energetic, loud. Holidays. Again, Dia de los Muertos. I'm mispronouncing that. I apologize. Day of the Dead. Cinco de Mayo. Communities are usually accepting other Hispanics, very open, very diverse, by the way, and so she mentioned that again and again. And big family gatherings. Wow, that was fun to learn a lot more about Hispanic Latinos from our student. And then there was for Caucasian and whites. This was kind of everyone was laughing, but then they were snickering, and then she brought more specificity to it. Celebrate holidays, and I can continue to ask questions. She said she realized that these are American holidays, and they tend to be stereotyped as white. And she mentioned that again and again. Diverse background, even though she said most white students are not as connected to their ethnicity, and they're more focused on their race here in the U.S. and not really taught on a great level, in a consistent level of their European heritage. So, but she mentioned it: Scottish, Irish, Polish, and then mentioned Christianity, and then she mentioned a very interesting topic: white privilege. And she said, I have to bring this up because this is an issue that really gets talked about consistently in her group, amongst her friends, the media, just being a Caucasian white person. There are certain privileges here in the U.S. And yet she counteracted that, saying that every white person doesn't have privilege in America. We automatically assume it. So that is a big trend, and she provided a great discussion on, sometimes that gets overblown and very stereotypical, and very similar to what she wrote on the board: basic white girl, a frat sorority, just because you dressed a certain way. And she even showed that what she had on was typical of a basic white girl in a sorority. But she said, I'm not the typical basic white girl in sorority. There's always a wide variety of the basic white girl in fraternity and sororities. So that was great. And then she mentioned fast food and blonde hair and blue eye. And she said, yeah, those are stereotypes, but again, that is a part of our race. And so she handled it with great respect, and we all chuckled, we all laughed, and then others in the class brought up more specificity. And so we really enjoyed that discussion as well. And then group number 6, multiracial Americans, he did a great job recognizing that they cut across. And here's the biggest thing I brought up. Multiracial Americans are the fastest growing segment of the United States. Multiracial, biracial Americans, mixed, are the fastest growing. So they tend to have more different languages, more open-minded, blended traditions, families, and broad food options. And he did a great job of recognizing that they cut across all particular so-called racial populations in the United States. And then I finalized everything. I said, what is the take home? Basically, we had a great time with this. What is the take home? And I want to emphasize this to our listening audience for this show number. What is the take home for this fun class exercise on race? There are several takeaways. I'm going to highlight. 1, it's okay to have fun talking about race. We need to have fun talking about race and ethnicity. That's number 1. Okay, and we do it, and we can do it, and everyone can do it. So let's have fun talking about race. Number 2, let's learn more about each and every racial and ethnic population's cultural traditions, customs, values, and beliefs. We all need to learn more of another. Of course, we're part of one group, or 2 groups, or 3 groups, but learn what are the cultural traditions, patterns, and customs of another group, and another group, of all the 6 groups, and more. So you don't have to Google it, so you don't have to search for it. Talk to a person who is of a different racial and ethnic background. Ask him or her, what are your traditions? So again, number 2, learning the cultural traditions, patterns, customs of the major racial ethnic groups in the U.S. and all the others. And number 3, guess what? We have a lot of similarities in these cultural traditions. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of crossover. That means there's common ground. Looking at religion, looking at faith, looking at how people entertain each other, how people interact, how people engage with their families. The types of foods, yes, they're different, but how there's foods that we all eat that are similar. How we celebrate holidays, similar. So that's number 3. And number 4, really, the 4 is, yes, there are a lot of stereotypes out there. It's okay to talk about them. It's okay in the proper context to laugh about them, but keep it in its proper context. Remember, there's so much diversity out there, but within every group, yes, there are stereotypes, and all of us fit within those stereotypes, but keep it in its proper perspective. And last but not least, try it out with your family. Go home, talk with your family, and share this information and do this exercise with your family. See what they say about the different cultural traditions, patterns of other groups. Have fun with it. Have fun with it. On a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, middle of the day, early morning. Just try it out with your own family. That's what I'm truly encouraging. A takeaway from this show number 13. Race and ethnic relations on campus. Fun exercise on race. Share it with your family. Send me and when you do that, send me a response. When you share and try it out, send me a response, folks. Send me a response at EJB678@gmail.com. That's EJB678@gmail.com. I want to hear your response. What happens when you start having a fun exercise, home exercise with your family? See how their response is. Have fun with this. Keep it in its proper context, but this allows us to develop more camaraderie, connection, learning, and breaking down those barriers. Stop being so politically correct. Have fun talking about race and ethnicity. That's what this show is about. I am Dr. B. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for our sponsors, Podbean. Thank you, iTunes. Thank you, Google Play. Thank you, Spotify. Thank you, YouTube. And thank you, iHeartRadio. Wow, we've covered a lot within this 30 minutes. I went a little long, but I want you to start having fun. And that's what we're going to do in these podcast shows, these continued future podcast shows. I am Dr. B. I want to thank you again for listening. Please share it with your neighbors, share it with your friends, and let's continue to have fun talking about race and ethnicity in America. Peace out, folks. I'm out of here. Peace out.